Hello. Today I'm going to show you this hand where I called Prodigy with ace high for 300 blinds. And I'm going to try to present you 4 hands that build a case for why this call is actually worth 300 blinds EV instead of 0 like it should, and how we could infer basically exactly what hand Prodigy was holding before making the call. So here's the hand. We have ace queen. We open, get 3-bet. 8 deuce 5. We're like 180 deep, and we face an overbet on flop. So he's straight going for that representation of a range of overpairs and overcards, roughly. We make the call. On turn, he goes for the half pot. Story checks out so far. Ace queen here is pretty strong because it dominates the overcards that he might be bluffing, like queen 10, queen jack, those kinds of hands. And it draws well against hands like 10s, right? So he has good equity against bluffs, and it has not that bad equity against value. Also, if he had an overpair like aces, for example, he might take a different line. He might not overbet the flop, right? So we have very good equity against the range that he's representing. So we make the call. And a river, king of clubs completes. So some of those overcards that he could have had hit at top pair, he could also have a flush that hits the river. And Prodigy decides to go quarter pot. Very specific sizing. It makes a lot of sense because it basically means that he was representing something like 10s, 9s, a hand like that. And on the river, those get devalued, and he decides that even though it's half a stack, they are just worth about 60 to 70% equity rather than, I don't know, 70 to 75. I'm not sure what the threshold would be, but that's kind of what he goes for. And we make the call. Now, I'm not going to show you the hand yet. I'm going to present to you the 4 hands I was talking about. And it's your job to try to figure out what hand he was holding before we go back to this hand. Now, obviously, I don't actually know if I'm right. I don't know what Owen was thinking of if my reads were right, or I just got lucky and he just happened to have the hand that confirms my read. But yeah, I'm just going to show you the 4 hands. I'm going to build that case, and I'm going to try to explain to you how you can use certain concepts to gain short-term advantages over players that would beat you long-term. Right? Owen is a much more technical player than me. He would for sure be able to beat me over a long sample. But sometimes, if you're going to play a short enough sample to not create stats, to not create a huge history, you can sometimes make those big EV plays that are really hard to come back from. So, hand number 1, we have 4s right here. It's actually a bump pot. Heads up. King 8-8 rainbow. Check, bet small, call. Quite standard. We have to check quite often in a bump pot out of position because we have an inherent disadvantage by being out of position. Turns an 8. Interesting turn. I would say it's probably slightly good for me because he is more polar towards an 8 on flop, and I'm more condensed away from an 8. So this is probably helping my one-paired hands more and removing some of his value. Maybe there's some donking going on or something like that. But I decided to go for a check. And we get to the river probe, and I go block. And Owen decides to make the raise. Here's the funny thing about this spot. I had spent a few hours, a couple weeks back, making a GTO Wizard video about Owen's hands in the coin poker challenge, where I went over 15 or 20 trying to figure out how Prodigy thinks, right? And I thought I had some reads on his thought process. Right? That's why I made this call. Now, this is something he couldn't have possibly known because that video never saw the light of day. Basically, GTO Wizard told me, look, the sound in this video is horrible. I don't know how you recorded it. The microphone is garbage. We can't put this shit out. Right? And they didn't put it out. So suddenly I was sitting on all of those showdowns that I had studied, and nothing to do with them. So I made this call. And he had a bluff. Now again, did I get lucky? Possibly, but it's also possible that I was onto something. So far, he's probably not thinking much, other than, that's an odd call, right? It's a bit of a ambitious call, but it's not like the craziest call ever. Now, this hand gets a little bit spicier. So we have Queen 10. We make the call pre-flop, Ace 9-9 rainbow, check call, turns an ace, and it goes check, check. And here, based on the secret reads that I had built going over those showdowns, I decided to go block, right? Which is definitely not GTO, right? It's basically too thin. King high can do this. Queen high is far too thin because Prodigy is going to have a ton of king high here. But it kind of worked, as you'll see. So Prodigy raises pretty big. When he raises to this size, he's basically saying that he has mostly an ace that he's low played on turn. Could be a 9 as well. And we make the call. And he has 10 high again. Now, this one is going to send red alarm to Prodigy, right? Like, he's going to interpret this and he's going to definitely think that I'm doing something. He doesn't know what, but he knows that I'm doing something. I think he actually threw a shit emoji at me in this hand, which is kind of funny. And this is kind of another concept that you can use when you're playing against really, really strong players, which is the power of context, right? The power of the history of hands that you're building with a player, right? I know why I made the play, but he doesn't know why I made the play. But I know that he doesn't know. And I can tell how he might interpret it, right? He might think that I'm a station. Basically, something's already cooking up, right? So let's move on to the next hand. So here we're holding eights. We 3-bet. We get called by Prodigy. Queen 9 deuce, rainbow, sorry. Check call. So far, standard. Turns an 8, so I'm pretty happy to see that. And the turn goes check, check. River is a 7. Now, there is a concept here where, because in our range, there's a lot of hands like Ace 8 maybe, but more so Jack 8, 10 8, hands of those of that sort. Eights is sharing blockers with those, and therefore we're supposed to check both, right? Because we're forced to check with a hand like 10 8, Jack 8. So we should check both hands to have our checks be protected, and also so that our check jams or our check raises are consistent blocker wise, right? We use Jack 8, 10 8 as a check raise as a bluff, and 8s as a check raise for value. By the way, if you want to learn more about this, you should probably check out my CFP, DEADREAD, links somewhere. So yeah, make sure to check it out. But yeah, in reality, though, what I did was blocking. Right? And this is because at the end of the day, if I have a read, I'm just going to follow the read. Right? We had a read. We've been threading with it. We've been building on top of it. I'm just going to keep mashing the same button every time. It's like Tekken, right? If pressing square a bunch of times works, then just press square. And Owen did something a bit unexpected. He went all in. Okay, this was not part of my plan. I was a bit spooked. Now, I had to call, but this is actually a kind of a weird spot because he's supposed to probably have mostly smaller sizes, right? He's not repping a range that hits this river very strongly, right? He's mostly repping like 2 pairs when it, like, not with this size, but on this river in general, his top of range represents something like 2 pair, some top pair maybe. So when he does this, he's repping a very, very narrow range. And I called, and he shows up with Queen 10. Okay, something's off. Now, we've been kind of talking about this idea that maybe Owen thinks I'm a station by this point. Also, I'm showing showdowns like this. I value bet Queen high before. Now I'm blocking with the wrong trap, and he knows it's the wrong trap. he probably just thinks I'm clueless and I'm a station, right? And this is not wrong for him to think, right? There is an inherent information asymmetry in poker that is just part of the game, right? It doesn't mean it's a mistake for him to think those things. It's just his best guess at the time. So yeah, let's look at one more hand. This is King Jack. We 3-bet. We get called. Queen 10-4 rainbow. And we go for a check. I don't think I had a particular exploit at this point. I was just kind of playing standard. And sometimes you can check with this and check call. Turns to 5. Now the most standard play is probably to check call again. And the river's a king. Okay, so we sort of hit the river, right? It's not great, but it's, you know, we beat some hands. And Prodigy goes all in. Now this is kind of spooky at this point, right? Because we think that he thinks I'm a station, right? So it's not great. It's hard for him to rep worse than my hand. He could have, I guess, something like King 6, King 7. But basically, I thought that was enough for calling, even though I was a little bit spooked. And when I called, he shows up with ace queen. Bro, come on. This is a huge punt in GTO, right? At this point, he's just mashing the bet button. He has me fully station tagged. And he's getting unlucky because I end up just having hands and he's running into it, right? That's just unlucky by him. But so far, the threat we are building seems to check out. It seems like we are actually station tagged. Now, how does it make sense that the whole point of this video is that I'm going to show you why I made a huge station with ace high, and in the hands that lead up to it, my explanation is that Owen thinks I'm a station, right? How does him thinking I'm a station make me call with ace high? That makes no sense, right? Okay, so let's go back to the original hand with all of the information available. So we're back here. We have ace queen, 3 pot. We call, face the overbet, face the half pot. And let's think about his range now. So he goes quarter pot. Now, based on the history of hands we've seen, don't you think it's reasonable to think that if he had a hand like tens, he would just probably jam, right? He thinks I'm a station. Why go quarter pot with tens if I'm going to call anyway, right? So it seems like it's probably not tens based on those 2 last hands that we saw. But then how is it a bluff? Right? We also think that he probably wouldn't bluff us, right? Well, there are certain hands that are really ugly to give up, right? This is a river that is ultimately good for him, right? We don't really hit the king very much. It's a very bluffable river. And there's certain combos that are really mandatory bluffs that probably win like 5 to 10 blinds in theory or something like that on a 300 big blind pot, right? What would those hands be? It would be something like Jack 9 offsuit, 10 9 offsuit, some type of, maybe there's some type of like 10 7 offsuit, with all of those with a club. I mean, right? Those hands with a club that are blocking the flush. The king is a great card, and Owen is in that position where he's like, this guy's a station. What the hell do I do with my Jack 9? I need to bluff, right? But I can't jam, right? It's not going to work. So what if I just block, right? Now that's what I'm thinking. Again, I don't know if this is what was going through his head. But I actually called this hand verbatim. I said, I think this is Jack 9 with a club, and made the call. And he shows up with Jack 10 with a club. I was off, but, you know, it's pretty good still. So that's the beauty of information asymmetry. See you in the next one.